So, hello everybody, and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. As usual, I'm your host, Hannah Monroe, and with me today is Sarah Watson, who is Director of Finance and Technology at the Make-A-Wish Foundation in the UK. So, welcome, Sarah. Wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you, Hannah. It's lovely to be here.
And obviously, this coming up to Christmas is a wonderful time to talk about everything that you guys do at Make-A-Wish. But before we start on the obviously the foundation and what you guys do, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in your role at Make-A-Wish?
Well, it's a bit of an interesting story. So my early career, Hannah, my love was SMEs and startups, and you might not think that there's a lot of correlation between those and charities, but actually, particularly with startups, lots of ambition and never enough funding. So quite good actually for moving into the charitable sector. So about 9 years ago now, I was looking for a challenge, and I met a really inspirational CEO of a charity. This was a blind children and babies charity, and they had lots of assets and no money, and they were facing a managed exit from the bank. And I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't know these things happened. You know, what was going to happen to the services, what was going to happen to the children. And I thought, well, this will be interesting. I could learn lots of things, and it's a nice, it's a project piece, so that'll take me back to where I want to go. I never came back. I moved into the not-for-profit sector, so I went with the charity. We rehomed it into a larger London charity, and then spent a couple of years with them, learning really, or relearning actually, a lot of the skill sets and how they applied in a not-for-profit environment, and brought that kind of commercial element too, which I think was really beneficial. And from there, then I spent some time with a membership organisation. Again, this was an NGO, so completely different, very much members coming together to work for a shared interest and passion. Actually, they were really passionate about advocating for evidence-based medicine. So the organisation is Cochrane, who produce Cochrane Reviews. And it was my first experience of working with academics, research institutions, hospitals, and the healthcare sector, and really starting to cut through the noise of what that looked like. And publishing was a big part of this. So learning about the publishing industry, open access, fascinating. Completely different business model. And then I wanted to see what the funding side of the sector looked like. So I had some time with Social Investment Business. They provide grants and loan funding into the social investment and not-for-profit sector. Incredibly amazing the work that they do, but for me it was one step removed. So they were the funder in the middle of sort of the very large funders, government or otherwise, and then the organisations delivering impact and the work. And that's what I really wanted to get back to. So the role came up with Make-A-Wish, and I couldn't wish for a more impactful, impact and outcomes driven organisation that is just incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And I was telling you before the show, actually, like Make-A-Wish is one of those charities I've always loved and admired from afar. So it's wonderful. So for those that are listening that may not know what Make-A-Wish does, do you want to just tell us a little bit about the charity, how it started, and where the idea came from?
Yeah, of course. So Make-A-Wish is a global organisation. So globally, it started in 1980, and we're here because of a boy called Chris Grecius, who in 1980 was age 7, and he had a wish to be a police officer. He was living in Phoenix, Arizona, and his local community came together to grant his wish just days before he died, and that was the start of Make-A-Wish globally. So we have granted over 520,000 wishes globally. We've got over 43,000 volunteers, and it's a global movement, passionate about granting wishes for critically ill children. And in the UK, our story started in 1986. We had 3 volunteers granting the first wish. This year, we've got over 300 volunteers, and to date, we've granted 16,000 wishes, which is absolutely incredible until you put the stats of how many children need us. So there's 60,000 plus children in the UK today that we could help if we had the resources to do so. So to put that in context, in 36 years, we've only reached 27% of the children who need us today. So we've got a lot more to do.
Absolutely. And what a mission to be moving forwards with as well. So Tell us a bit about your role, because one of the things I find interesting is that you have the title Director of Finance and Technology. Now, technology tends to be hidden in the finance role, but with yours, it's obviously front and center. So I don't know, how was that a title that that was created and you walked into, or is it something that's developed over time as you've been with the organisation?
It's a good question. So not for profit roles for finance are never just finance, because organizations can't ever afford the size of leadership teams that they would like to have. So it does come, and part of that is the interest that comes with that. For Make a Wish, my role was new to Make a Wish in August, September time of the year before last. So I came in as an interim finance director, but knew that this change was coming up. And so it was specifically to add technology, because at that point, all of the tech was outsourced. So there wasn't anybody internally who had technology as their remit. And what had been recognized for the organization was actually just how important technology and the infrastructure that it enables and creates was going to be in our mission to scale to reach every eligible child.
And so that's a really interesting statement you've just made there about the importance of technology to achieve the mission. How does Make a Wish see technology as part of their strategy?
So for us, technology sits, and we have 4 goals to achieve our strategy, and we sit within goal 3, which is organizational capability, and the recognition that in order to achieve all that you need to as an organization, you have to be fit for purpose. Your capability to deliver in a networked way and a devolved an environment where you can devolve power, decision making to local communities, which is what our strategy is absolutely underpinned by. You can only do that with effective tools, because otherwise everything is relational. You have no quality control, you have no mechanism for communication. Everything takes a long time, it's not intuitive. And the biggest part of this is we've got 3 values: magical, inclusive, and inspiring. There is nothing worse than a process flow that is none of those things. If you're a donor and you want to donate money and it's difficult, you're not going to do it. If you're a volunteer who wants to grant wishes, you're here to grant wishes, not wrestle with infrastructure that doesn't work for you. It's got to be straightforward and simple. And our families and our wish children, they deserve to have the best experience. So we really need to think about, how do we make sure that everybody's experience, however they interact and engage with Make a Wish, is magical.
Yeah, and I don't think the word magical is often used in combination with technology, though it can, when it works well, it can be magical, as you say. So tell us a little bit about how you approach the strategy behind technology. As when you're thinking about what kind of technology you would use, how you approach and how you prioritize as well, because that must be the biggest challenge as a not-for-profit. Where do you spend the money? Because it's so difficult to choose sometimes.
Yeah, and this was the hardest thing, Hannah, because coming in with no internal resource at all, so you were almost having to pick up and try and evaluate what was in place. And we had fantastic support from a volunteer CTO at that time who had been supporting, but again, from a distance. And what we really needed to do was to make sure that in-house we had those core skill sets aligned to what people were actually doing. Because one of the challenges, and you've probably seen this yourself, is if you impose things on people, they don't really want to use it. If it's a tool that enables them to do things more efficiently, effectively, this is brilliant. You're halfway there before you've started. So what we did was look at the different areas, and for us that fell into 3 categories. So that was looking at our technology infrastructure, so everything from our platforms that we used, were they server based, were they cloud based, how safe and secure were our systems, what was our hardware like for our teams, and our comms tools as well. So this was really thinking about moving away from servers, moving into a cloud based environment that really supported better connectivity. So we were able to securely share files, to make sure people had logins that allowed them access to our systems, and also gave us phone systems, because actually what we didn't want was our volunteers having to, for example, use their personal devices to contact families. So that was really important. The second part for us was, what was our our operating system? How do we have a hub that everybody, whether you were a member of staff or you were a volunteer, that you could engage with, and you understood where a wish was on its journey? Because if you imagine absolutely everything from that first call to a family, perhaps the referral that happened before that, all the way through to a wish being granted, all of that needed to sit somewhere centrally. And we needed to make sure that our end-to-end wish granting journey was really easy to engage with and also scalable. So what we had found was, because it had been built outsourced, it was very restrictive. It was a one-to-one relationship. So you would effectively take a wish through from start to finish, which is fine in a small environment, but actually it doesn't scale. You've got to find ways of people interacting in different ways. So that was really looking at, was our CRM fit for purpose? And then the third area was really thinking about data and analytics. So how did we build a structure that enabled us to put information in the hands of the right people so they could immediately take the decisions that they needed to, and remove those layers of hierarchy, or that the whole historic thing of waiting till month end for reports? That's not where we need to be. And particularly for us, as I'm sure we'll talk about, we were moving into a world where we'd recognise that we weren't just talking about cash anymore. We were talking about gifts in kind, and that was a huge part of our strategy. And a gifts in kind is where you could donate a goods or service directly to a wish that doesn't have a cash value, but actually it is a resource that needs to be matched to requirement. So for us to be able to do this successfully, we needed data and we needed tools to be able to do that. And so bringing all those three things together was meeting our mission, that was about every wish being as unique as the child who wishes for it. And we don't know what a child's going to wish for until they do. So we can't plan for any of that. We needed a system and a structure that the minute a child wished, it sent up this beacon and an alert to our networked community that said, there's a wish here, you can help in these ways. And we just didn't have the tech infrastructure to help us to do that. So that was the challenge, and that's where we started.
Oh, wow. So a very small mission that you set for yourself to
Very
achieve.
small mission, yes.
And and that was literally, 2 years ago that you started on this journey?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not much more than
Yes.
just over a year, actually. I mean, the organisation has been working on
Wow.
this since about 2018. So they recognised the need, but we hadn't really had that investment in an internal skill set. And I suppose the creative imagination that then comes from that, because you've got to be curious, you've got to be prepared to fail, you've got to be prepared to try things. And actually coming into post, that was probably the biggest challenge, was kind of saying, well, we've sort of tried some of these things and we've got a CRM, but it's not quite working. And that doesn't mean to say it's not good. We just need to realign some pieces. We need to build out from where we are. And it was that whole bit of saying to people, actually, do you know what? We can do this. So yes, it has only been, unbelievably, just over a year, but we are just at the point now of going into UAT testing for this new end-to-end wish granting process that we will roll out to our teams in January. And I couldn't be prouder of the effort, the work, and the love that's gone into it, and the incredible impact it's going to make.
It does sound incredible. And I think what's really interesting about this is that I think there's two things that you said that I found really insightful, and I'm hoping our listeners got that. I think the first thing is, just because the tool isn't currently working for you doesn't mean it's not the right tools. I think there is a tendency to look at systems and go, oh, if it's not working now, it will never work. And given the investment that people make in systems and the cost of it, I think that's a really important piece. It's wonderful that you guys have taken a step back and gone, actually, we're just not using it to the best of its capability. And secondly, I think what's also interesting is, obviously, your use case is quite unique. I don't know many other businesses or organizations that are using CRM to grant wishes to children. So how did you approach scoping out the processes, and getting the team on board as part of this rethinking of your systems and your processes?
Well, this is where the finance bit kicks in. So one of the benefits of having come up through, and I'm of a certain age, where systems didn't really do things, so you had to learn how you could get information out of finance systems in the old days. And that makes you very good at process mapping and actually looking at, well, if I want to achieve this, then I need to structure things in a particular way. And one of the observations I had coming in was we were doing a lot of things in terms of our month end process for finance that were very akin to manufacturing. So we were putting through what we called a wish provision. So we had to recognize the costs associated with wishes in the same way you would do for kind of a work in progress in a manufacturing environment. But we weren't using any of the tools or techniques linked to that. We were doing this all in an incredibly manual, difficult, challenging way that meant our forecasting was all over the place. And, back to where we're starting from, we don't know what a child's going to wish for. So we've got so many levels of assumptions in here, and then we're trying to structure without a framework that is helping us. So I thought, well, why don't we use product thinking as you would do for manufacturing? Because actually, we have 4 wish types. We have to be something, to go somewhere, to meet, or to have. Now, they have other things that sit underneath them, but broadly, they're categories. And people did look at me like I was mad, because how can you have a unique wish for a child and categorize it? But you can, because if you want to be something or someone, there's certain things that you're probably going to have. You're going to want, if you want to be a princess, Hannah, today. So you want to be a princess, you need an outfit. You might need shoes. You might need a venue to be a princess in. Now, those things would be the same if you wanted to be an elf. You would need an outfit, and you would need a venue, and you would need the things to stage the wishes, if you like. So we worked out that we could, using product thinking, take this into the way that we built this out. And all of a sudden, that opened up all sorts of tools for us, because the world thinks like that. So if we could categorize what we needed to do in a way that we could make it easy for people to engage with us, we could suddenly push out requirements. So what we've been able to do in our new way of working is build a wish design process that captures the wish story into these kind of, if you like, more generic wish types, and allows that to push a request out through our Gifts in Kind app that will say to you, actually, for your princess wish over here, I need a costume and it needs to look like this, and this is the size. And you can say, okay, I can do that. And we can then match that back through the requirements in the system and back to our month end process much easier, because we have a live document that says, here's all the stock items that we're requesting effectively through Gifts in Kind. Here's the ones we've had donated. Here are the gaps, so we can manage and monitor that. This is what it means for our cash flow. This is what we need to purchase. And it really helps us to better target resource to requirement just from changing the way we think about how we grant wishes.
That's wonderful. So you're basically creating a bill of materials. So I've worked with manufacturing. You're basically creating a bill of materials for a wish, which is which makes absolute sense to me. I know if I was going to be a princess, I'd expect my tiara, my sparkly heels, and my lovely big princess dress. So, no, absolutely. Because that's very much design, isn't it? Critical thinking, taking a step back and dissecting the problem. What other key sort of changes in maybe thought as much as process did you have to make?
Well, we had to keep the heart in what was going to become a more automated process. So it is intentionally designed to have wish magic as part of every wish, which is totally separate to that bill of materials approach, so that however much there are common elements to a type of wish, it will be completely bespoke for an individual child, because it will have their requirements linked to wish magic. And that was really important to us, because we really didn't want this to feel like an automated process. It's absolutely not that. It's giving the right tools to our wish granters so that they were spending their time on wish magic, not wish admin.
Absolutely. And I guess that bespoke element is the key to making the magic and making it so personalized to that child. Like you say, every wish for every child should be unique to them and their own experience.
Absolutely.
And from a finance perspective, what did you in finance have to think about and change to be able to deliver on this mission?
Well, it's really interesting because obviously cash, we all know we have to account for it in a particular way, and we know how to do that. There's not really any rule books around how you account for Gifts in Kind, and there is some guidance there, but actually from a charity commission point of view, the legislation around this doesn't want to overburden charities. So what it says is, if you can capture that information and record it and substantiate it, you can show it in your financial statements. But if you can't, it doesn't really matter as much. It's not the same. It doesn't have the same levels of scrutiny, I don't think, as cash does. But for us to explain to our donors, to explain to our families actually the resource that's available to us and what we do with that, it's incredibly important. So we had to really think about, okay, well, we might not have to do it, but we do want to do it. And that was a change from what we've done previously. So we put a lot more care and attention into how do we almost replicate the same processes that we've got for cash, for gifts in kind. What does that mean? How do we show that? Because even though in the accounts it's a straight in and out, you've got a debit and credit and the bottom line doesn't change, but obviously it's material when you're talking about wishes where they're 100% provided by gifts in kind, not cash funding. So in terms of demonstrating effective use into impact, so important. So that was really, there was a re-education of us to say, well, we might not have to do this, but for us to be able to scale and to move forward, we need to think differently, and we need to adjust our metrics accordingly so that we both account for and can explain, set KPIs and measures around gifts in kind, because without them, we'll never achieve our strategy to reach every child.
Absolutely. And in terms of the education and almost the hearts and minds piece behind that change and that transformation, how did you approach that?
It was challenging. Well, I was saying it still is challenging, because ultimately across the organization, I think once you start to democratize data, and this is really important because all of these elements have always been there within the organization. They just haven't all been together cohesively in a way that everybody can see and take decisions on. So first of all, you've got to work out that, okay, have we asked the right questions? Do we understand what it is that we need to do and what's really going to build up KPIs into a successful output so we do achieve all that we're setting out to? We then need to bring those diverse data sets together somehow and make sure that we are measuring things in the same way, because what we found was different people within the organization would have two different measures for the same metric. So actually, no, we're reporting on this now, so we need consistency of approach. And that's coming through training. And one of the things that we found incredibly helpful with all of this was, as we built more out within our CRM, we were able to share reporting and dashboards and live data. And all of a sudden, everybody got quite excited by this because nobody really minded then where it came from. It was what you could do with it. Suddenly, you didn't have to worry about producing it. It was there. And then you could have the meeting suddenly became about what we were doing rather than just collecting and creating and historical data. It was forward looking. So I think we're still on that journey of getting everybody on board with this. And as I say, we've got this whole rollout to come in January, but we found breaking it down into small chunks that are digestible, taking the time to provide the training and support that individuals need, and recognizing some people need more support, other people just want to play with the system and get their hands in there and see where that goes. And then the biggest change for us has been accepting that if we want to be truly agile and respond to each individual wish, our planning and the way that we work also has to be agile. So we can't anymore do this annual cycle of budgeting and planning. We've got to do a quarterly review forecast. We've really got to get good at working with uncertainty. And I think that's helping us, actually. It's helping us to know that sometimes we get things right, sometimes we need to adjust. But it's that continuous test and learn. So I don't know if that answers. That sounds like a very long ramble through a variety of things.
But I think it was some great points. I'm actually going to pick some of those up in a bit more detail, if that's all right with you. So, because I think there's some great points in there. So the first thing is about the power of real-time reporting. And I think this is always fascinating. For those that have experienced it, they understand the value of it. But if for those, it's trying to explain like how the organization shifts once you start to provide that. and how to take away the fear of giving people information, because there is this assumption, isn't there? Once you start giving people information, they're going to start questioning everything and checking everything and coming back to you with a billion and one answers. So tell me a bit about how you approached that. Did you have any challenges where people were worried about surfacing this information, or was it very much we need this, we need to make this step?
So a bit of both. So obviously for us, some data is highly confidential, and we needed to make sure that our teams were confident that we had the right levels of data privacy in place, so that we weren't we weren't exposing any data that we shouldn't be, was the first thing. So we had to make sure we had the right controls in place. We then needed to also reassure for the use case. So what was it that was important? So we were already producing a monthly report, but it was another thing that everybody had to do. So actually moving those metrics into a dashboard that just created itself, that was a great thing. So then the time was taken on really thinking about the narrative and explaining why, rather than, as I say, the creation of the data. And then getting people confident and comfortable to use that real-time data set that they probably hadn't had access to before to help inform their work. And when they saw how powerful that was for themselves, it suddenly, the penny dropped a little bit that actually, if that's working for me over here, my colleagues are going to be able to take better decisions because they don't have to ask me. What they might ask me is, what does this mean? And so I think it becomes about communication, about shared understanding, because everybody starts from the same place. You haven't got somebody who's got more knowledge than another person, although skill sets, there are some absolute dashboard wizards who've become very, very popular within the organization.
Yeah, that's it. You soon start to see them speaking out, don't you? Oh, can we just, I'm just going to tweak this for you. I'm just going to put this new display on this report. So, but that's wonderful. So actually, by starting to share data across the organization, it then you created that snowball effect, as I like to call it, like rolling the power of data through the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And also a recognition that data is incredibly important. So we've had to do a lot of work to make sure that it's clean, that it's usable, and a real awareness that if you pay attention to that, the dividends are huge. But it's got to be something front and center when you are designing, making sure that you've got everything in the right places, because the amount of effort that goes into data migration, we have been changing from legacy systems to new systems, and actually one of the projects that took much longer was a big piece of data migration. It's done now, it's just transformative, but it was a real headache to actually get it to where it needed to be.
I think people underestimate with any new system, whether it's finance, whether it's CRM, the both the importance and the time that it takes to migrate data well. For me, it's one of the things that people, they both know they've got an issue and a challenge there, but it's almost swept under the carpet when they're thinking about allocating time. I think a lot about training and testing, but not a huge amount about migration. So how did you approach the process of both, bringing together data sets? Because it sounds like there was a bit of designing out your data structures internally and what you're going to use, and share data dictionaries or however you want to call it, but also actually migration of that data.
It started with recognition that we just didn't have the in-house skills to do some of this ourselves. And however much we wanted to, and however much we intended to, we needed expert help, because it was too much for the team. So I think really properly evaluating your internal skill set is the first thing, and then how your internal skill set supports. We had some external help to do this, to make sure that the mapping was right, so that the team were very much in control of, okay, so what will this look like when it's finished? How do we bring these data sets together? And I think most importantly, what is our source of truth? And how many versions of that are we going to have? Because what we saw, certainly between the CRM and the finance system, was historically both of them had exactly the same information, duplicating effort, which it just didn't need to be. And what we needed to do is to take a step back in terms of data and really think about one data set the best environment to hold that in, and the, almost the split between how was one going to keep the checks and balances of the other, so that we had the right level of granularity and content in our data, and understanding where that mapped across, even if the data sets were slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's that's a really good piece, and for me as well is almost defining what that shared data looks like, and agreeing a definition can be sometimes interesting to approach, especially when you're talking about finance and CRM, because they're two very different perspectives of the same piece of data, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think also for us, one of the things that we've had to look quite closely at is income recognition. So, part of what we have to do is, obviously we are working to metrics to raise funding, but then equally, if funding is against a specific wish type, that's only recognised at the point that those wishes are granted. So, what does that mean in terms of, does that mean that it isn't recognised, or someone doesn't have recognition at the point that they've actually done their job and brought that income in successfully, just because we can't use it at that point in time? And that's true of whether that's cash or gifts in kind. So I think also taking the time to explain why different data sets are important, and how we use them, and how we bridge from one to the other, is incredibly important. And you don't always get it right first time. You need a few goes at it, and they iterate, don't they? I think is the important bit to say too.
And how did you deliver that education? Was that something you consciously did, as in you sat people down, explained the different data sets from both sides and why they were important and why you collected the data at different points? Or is there another mechanism, or did it just come about by chance?
Oh, it definitely didn't come about by chance. We wouldn't be there if that was the case. No, I mean, what we really fell back on was business partnering. So, at its heart, what you are charged with doing, whether you're working with finance or technology, is mapping infrastructure and tools and support to what the organization is delivering. And so business partnering and the principles of making sure that you are coming together, that education is shared, and you're bringing that subject matter expert in finance or tech together with the business expert in terms of what they need to deliver. So for us, that was instituting a month-end meeting, first of all, between finance and the budget holders, to really go through their numbers in detail, to make sure that it was part and parcel of the tools that they were using, rather than just another thing that they needed to do. And that really helped to show the benefits, and, as I say, move us into that agile reforecasting quarterly way of working rather than static numbers. And I think more on the tech side, it was providing the same support, but in a bespoke way to teams. So basically opening up, we've got everything from an online ticketing system where our teams can raise a ticket to say, I would like a report, to booking in time with somebody just to sit down and spend an hour saying, okay, let's have a look. Should we create you a dashboard? What are the key things that you're doing? And drop-in sessions. So I think the the critical bit with this is business partnering needs to happen regularly on a monthly basis, but the tools and the support that individuals need should be that. They should be individual and be part of an ongoing dialogue. And that's what we've worked really hard to get that balance across all teams.
Yeah, and what I love about that is actually, like you say, the agreement around data definition sounds like a technology piece, but actually it's a key part of finance business partnering, and it's an ongoing piece of work and an ongoing piece of communication that organizations need to think about. And that's a really interesting way of describing it. And I think a lot of people will think, oh yeah, why aren't we using our business partners to support that and to drive that forwards? So obviously this has been a massive shift for you as an organization, and a big piece of change, and it sounds like it's going incredibly well, which is very exciting. So in terms of, personally, I'm a big believer in hearts and minds when it comes to transformation, because in my experience, it doesn't matter how great the people are or the processes, how great the processes are, how great the technology is. If you don't have the people behind it driving it forwards, then success is not assured. So how did you approach that, and how did you get the teams together and drive things to deliver on this success?
Yeah, it's a good question. There were points where I wondered if I was in an alternative universe, because when you're at the very beginning part of it and you can see the end point and you're thinking, I've got to articulate all these steps to get there. For me, the key bit was putting the right team around this. So when people are frightened or positional or worried, they won't become curious. And if they don't become curious, then you can't play in a space that says, okay, this is exciting. We know we want to do this really difficult thing over here. What does it look like? So that was the first thing, was to actually make sure that we had, it didn't matter what had gone before. It didn't matter how negative people felt about things. We had a real agreement that we were going to set that to one side and focus on outcomes and what we wanted to achieve collectively together as a team. And then also picking your battles, I think. So there were things that we could get on and do without having to engage too widely. So we could do something and then we could demonstrate something. And that really helped. So part of the transformation build, we were fortunate enough to be successful within a major grant program, where it was a pro bono skills-based delivery that helped us to build part of the infrastructure. And what that meant was that we were suddenly working in a different way, showing how we could transform not only what we were able to deliver, but the way that we were going to do it. We could find partners who would work with us without necessarily needing funding. And all of a sudden, that did get the attention of the rest of the organisation, because it's quite interesting now. You're building out something to take these non-cash donations through a scheme that's also non-cash. This is good. And I think for us, that was the thing, was explaining this is a journey. We are stewards of an organisation at a point in time, and it's our responsibility to do the best that we can for our wish children. We put them front and centre of everything we do, and we just kept coming back to that. What is it that we need to do to make this the best experience, to reach as many children as we can? And that really helped us to keep that in mind. And the other thing we do, and it's not just for the project, but we start within any of our team meetings and our organisational meetings, we start with wish stories. We have Feedback Friday where we share the output of the wishes, because I think when you go through significant pieces of transformation, it is hard and it's technically difficult and it's challenging, and you must remember why you're doing it. This isn't about technology. It's not about finance. It's about critically ill children having the most amazing magical wish granted. And that motivates people and wins hearts. You don't need to do much more than that.
You are in a very special place in that you have a very, very impactful mission statement to work to be very fair, Sarah. So that obviously is a massive driver. So for anybody that's listening that is looking, perhaps doesn't have the emotional impact of your mission and is looking to approach a finance transformation or a technology project, what are the key things that you would say to them before they start? What do they need to think about?
Be really clear from the outset what it is you want to achieve. Because as soon as you start to look at solutions that are going to support you, they can do all sorts of other clever things. And you can very easily get distracted, as can people around you. And the other thing, other reason for doing that is, do you know what? There will be cost-effective solutions that will be probably 85% of the way to what you want to do off the shelf, not bespoke, cost you far, far less. And if you hold in mind what you want to do and how far you can get, that really helps when you see these beautifully shiny things and you have to stop and think, okay, what's the thing I want to do? And does that look nice? Because it's very difficult once you start. So I would say be really clear about your requirements. If you can't articulate them, you will build the wrong thing, and you can't explain it to somebody else. So if you can't explain what you want, you will never, ever have the solution that's going to work for you. And to your point you made about people saying, well, this isn't working, I need to step away. Well, oftentimes that's because requirements weren't clearly articulated. So spend the time on requirements gathering and it will pay huge dividends later on.
Know the problem you're about to solve before you actually try and solve it. So I couldn't agree with you more. There's some very wise words there, Sarah. And yeah, kid in a sweetie shop. I often use that terminology. Working in technology, it is very easy to get excited about this great piece of technology, but it all comes back to what you're trying to solve for the customers that you're working with. So I think that's some brilliant advice. So do take heed, listeners. Sarah has very, very well summed up how to approach your next finance or technology transformation project. And I think that goes for whether that is process or technology, actually. in terms of a philosophy to keep in mind.
Sorry, Hannah, I was just going to add to that. I was just going to say that I think don't build in isolation, because this will have to integrate with
Yeah.
something somewhere, and make sure you've got the right team around you so that you don't just have something that works for you. It actually advances the mission of everybody. And that also helps with the hearts and minds piece.
There is a tendency for finance to see their systems for them alone versus thinking about what it means to the wider organization. And there was on the podcast previously, I had a very interesting quote from another CFO, and I thought this was very accurate, in that finance defines the pace at which the business moves. And you don't realize it, but the pace at which finance delivers data, delivers insight, delivers partnering is what actually supports the business to grow and move. So, and if you don't know if you're behind, then you probably are, was his assessment. So I think that's a really, really interesting insight.
I think so. And the other thing we found is that finance also defines how much responsibility other teams take. So if you want your business partners to support, you've got to encourage them to not take the decisions for the business owners. The business owner holds their budget, they take the decisions. Finance helps them to do that. And I think being really cognizant of that is incredibly important.
Oh, another really insightful comment. You're full of them today, Sarah. And I think that is really accurate, because there is a traditional viewpoint of finance, isn't there? That they are the people that say no. And actually, it's not about saying no. It's about saying, this is your resource. How do you want to use it?
Mm. Absolutely. And really making sure then that you're taking shared decisions in the interest of the organization, because you have the knowledge, both from an expertise point of view, from a financial perspective, and also the delivery perspective from the business owner.
Oh, yes. And I guess what brings it really home is the fact that the decisions that you and your team make has such a big impact on children, worldwide, not obviously just UK, because Make-A-Wish is international. So before we finish, tell us a little bit about some upcoming campaigns. If anybody wants to get involved in what you are doing and helping to support and deliver on those wonderful wishes, how can they do that?
So first thing to say is head over to our website, www.makeawish.org.uk. We have a Christmas appeal which shares Ellie's story. So Ellie was a rush wish when she came to us, and a rush wish for us is children whose prognosis has deteriorated. We know that they don't have, their life isn't going to be as long as might have been expected. And what she really wanted, she loved Christmas. And from the time she was 3, her favourite thing to do was to drive around and look at all the Christmas lights. And so her wish was inspired by the festive light tradition. And she had her whole street lit up for a really special Christmas. The whole street was lit up by lights, just like Ellie lit up all of her lives around her. And people came from all over the neighbourhood to do this. It's worth saying that less than a month later, on the day that her Christmas lights were switched on, Ellie passed away. She was just 17 years old. Her family really value the wish. They have told us that it was incredibly important for them, that they knew that the end of Ellie's life was so special, and they were able to give her this gift that was so connected to all they had done together. So if anybody is thinking of giving a gift at Christmas, we can help other children living with critical conditions like Ellie if you do so.
And how can people support? Is it donations, like you say, gifts in kind? What kind of support do you need as an organisation?
So there's lots of ways to get involved. So that's obviously monetary through giving a donation of cash. We also have volunteering. So you can register to be a volunteer with us to help and support us, both capture wish stories from children, also build wish anticipation and grant wishes. So you can register to be a volunteer. We have lots of events. If you're a keen runner and you're thinking about that you might want to train for the London Marathon next year as a New Year's resolution, you can sign up as a Wish hero and run for us in one of our challenge events. You could, four of my team did a skydive last week to raise money for critically ill children. You could jump out of a plane for us, really anything. You could bake a cake, anything at all, Christmas light switch-ons, whatever it is, the support would be amazing. And our Gift in Kind app is launching in in February. So keep an eye out for news around that. And that will allow you to donate directly goods and services to Wishes for Children. And you'll know exactly where that's going. So that's going to be really, really incredible when that happens.
Very exciting. It's amazing what transformation and technology can deliver. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being part of the podcast and for sharing both your story and obviously the story of Make-A-Wish with us. And yes, I'm wishing you and the team all the very best. And thank you so much for sharing, your insight and your vision.
Thank you for inviting me, Hannah. It's been lovely to meet you.
Hey everyone. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. And just a really quick Christmas update for you, sparkly jumper and all. Like everyone, as much as we love this podcast, we think it's really important to take a break. So we will be taking a very short break over the Christmas period to relax, maybe get some new inspiration over the festive season. But we will be back in the new year, and we've got some fabulous shows on New Year's resolutions, and kicking off 2023 with a bang. So we'll be sitting and waiting to release nice and early in January, if I can get my words right. So please do relax, enjoy. And if you're absolutely desperate to listen to some more fabulous episodes, don't forget we have a huge back catalogue of content. We've been doing the podcast for a number of years now, literally since lockdown. So it's there's huge amounts of great guests, and some of our older episodes are my favorites. And of course, don't forget to check out our webinars and our financial transformation live sessions on YouTube. We've been doing those monthly, so there's a huge amount of content which should hopefully keep you distracted. I hope that everyone listening to this has a wonderful Christmas and a very happy new year. And let's all come back in 2023 refreshed and excited to start the year. Have a great Christmas, everyone. Take care. Bye.